The Chief Executive's interactive exchange question and answer session ends now. Council sitting now resumes. Mr. Lau Kok Fan.
Thank you, President. I fully support the Development, Town Planning, Lands and Works Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022. This is a key bill. It's a landmark bill. This shows under the new term of government, we are boosting speed, efficiency, quantity, and quality. And this is a key step. We will see results shortly. The bill amends 6 ordinances. For primitive sites, it would take 4 years instead of 6 to speed-ready sites. For larger sites, the time would go down from 13 years to 7 years. If this bill cannot be passed, there will be wider implications. The bill is to take effect on September 1st. There will be the Sentient Technopole and the Northern Metropolis. Both will benefit from this bill. For the Sentient Technopole, land resumption will happen in 2024, site formation to be completed in 2026. For the Northern Metropolis, the land resumption will start in 5 years, and within 10 years, formation will need to be completed for 40% of the land and for 40% of the housing unit. Assuming this bill is passed, those goals can be met. If this bill cannot go through, and that is, we stick to the current system, the Sentient Technopole alone the outline zoning plan will take 17 months to complete, and then it's only in 2025 then there will be a chance that the OZP can be endorsed. And we will have to wait till the detailed design, funding applications, and after that the land resumption can happen. If we stick to the current system, you cannot have land resumption in 2024. The land resumption can only start in 2026, 27 at the soonest. That makes it so important to have this bill. In northeastern New Territories, Kutong North, Hongshui-Kyu, Hachu new development areas, I took part in the initial consultations and the process where the OZP was passed, funding applications, land resumption. I took part in all these steps for New Territories Northeast, Kutong North, etc. From the announcement of the plan to District Council consultation to the end of 2022 when the first housing units were up for sale, it took 15 years to get there. That is, the sale of the unit. There are public housing projects still going through this formation process. And it's only after 2030 that population intake will happen. So for such a large project, it takes 20 to 30 years to complete under the current system. Now for the Northern Metropolis, there will be 300 square kilometers with many projects ahead. So we need to speed up our development to make that project possible. 6 ordinances are covered. They are mainly the town planning, land resumption processes. I agree with the directions under the bill. For New Territories Northeast and Hongshui-Kyu, we have come across many issues that cannot be resolved through administrative means. So legislative amendment is the only way to fix those problems. So I've been closely in touch with the Development Bureau. I put forward ideas on streamlining procedures. I thank the government for adopting my ideas. Now, there are some key directions in the bill. First, streamlining procedure, shortening the time it would take. So, the town planning board amend the plan. The lead time will go down from 17 months to 9 months. So that really slashes the time it takes. Under the old system, we have repetitive procedures such as repetitive consultations. The bill will solve that too. In the New Territories Northeast consultations, I took part in more than 100 consultations of varying scales. Now, some argue we will have just one round of consultation instead of 3. Will that undermine public participation? And one thing that we need to see is that before the plan goes to the TPB, the government has already conducted different consultations. In the New Territories Northeast, it started in 2008. Between 2008 and 2012, there were 3 large consultations. There was a concept plan, and then it moved to an initial outline plan. I took part in all the consultations. It was a lengthy process. Now, let's take a recent example, the Santine Technopole. The plan was to have the outline zoning plan submitted to the TPB next year. Now, we propose simplifying the procedure. Starting from June 6th, the government started a 2-month public consultation. 627 hectares of land, among them 300 hectares for INT used. The consultation has already started. So by the time the outline zoning plan reaches the town plan, the plan goes to the TPB, public comments will have been taken into account, so a consensus is already forged by the time the plan reaches the TPB. Now let me return to the New Territories examples. 3 major consultations, over 100 sessions, over 4 years. By the time the plan reaches the TPB, there is abuse. More than 10,000 representations that look the same, and that took up time for 3 rounds of consultation. They're mostly repeating the same point. So turning that into just 1 round is something I agree with. Now to strike a balance, if say after the first round of representations, the government decides to make a change after taking on board the views, there will be further representations. So this is already striking a balance between public participation and efficiency. I hope we can see that this bill is clarifying the procedures too. The government takes back a site and then puts it for you to a temporary use. Even without this bill, the government can do this already. This bill sets out rules on how this can be done. Say only a deputy director or a deputy secretary can approve this, and there are time limits on land for temporary use. So I support the passage of this bill. I do have some concerns though. I know there are challenges confronting the government. Now you can have land resumption and plan making at the same time in parallel, and the compensation can be offered sooner. So there will be many sites to be resumed, and there will be an enormous resettlement exercise. So on compensation and resettlement, does the government have enough manpower to handle the work with enough efficiency? So this will take changes to the administrative process. So I hope after this bill is passed, the government can further streamline the development-related processes and also adopt new thinking for those involved in the work. That way, they can handle the volatile situation that require rapid responses in the future. Again, I support this bill. Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. Thank you, Madam Deputy. In the 2022 policy address, the Chief Executive proposed ways to address our housing issues. For land supply, there's a need to boost speed, efficiency, quantity, and quality. So there was a plan that was announced on streamlining development, and then this bill came out. This will amend the Town Planning Ordinance, Land Resumption Ordinance, Land Acquisition Possessory Title Ordinance, Foreshore and Seabed Reclamations Ordinance, Roads, Works, Use and Compensation Ordinance, Railways Ordinance, and the Environmental Impact Assessment Ordinance. Now, the change to the EIA Ordinance was approved on June 28th, so that the EIA process can be shortened to 18 to 24 months. As for this bill, that is the Development, Town Planning, Lands, Works, Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022, this bill will cover the other changes apart from EIA. Different procedures and processes are put in place to address different matters. But when these procedures come together, this will mean land development will have to jump through multiple hoops. So the government set up 5 directions. First, streamlining the statutory processes to minimize processes of a similar nature, and empowering government departments to take forward different procedures in tandem, clarifying ambiguous processes, making better use of public resources. I agree with these directions. With the change, the time it takes to turn primitive sites into speedway sites will go down from 6 to 4 years, and for larger projects, the time it takes will go down from 13 to 7 years. This will massively speed up land supply. Madam Deputy, the Bills Committee was set up in the beginning of this year. 13 meetings were held. We examined 124 clauses in the bill. At one meeting, we listened to views from deputations. Let me take this opportunity to thank Mrs. Regina Ip, the chairperson of the Bills Committee, and also Mr. Tony Tse, the deputy chairman. With their help, we managed to get through this complex bill containing contentious parts. I also agree with Mrs. Ip's commendation of the good work from the Development Bureau. Now I want to focus on the town planning process and ways to streamline the process. The bill wanted to cut down the rounds of consultations from 3 rounds to 1 round. So comments and further representations would be removed. The government told us from past experience, people would simply give us repetitive comments in the 2nd and 3rd rounds. But I argue that in streamlining the town planning process, you need to strike a balance. We need to protect private property and the public's right to put forward their views. The savings will be just 4 months by reducing the public consultation from 3 to 1 round, but that will massively undermine the quality of public participation. Now, someone may put in their views at the last minute. The comment or the representation may be very controversial. And then other people will not be able to comment on this contentious representation. The Northern Metropolis, for example, covers a large area. This will involve a lot of land resumption and rezoning. When this kind of last-minute contentious representation comes in and there's no further way to comment on it, the people will get very upset. I thank the government for being responsive by agreeing to move an amendment on this point. So the TPB, in meeting representations, will continue to invite further representations. This way, different people can comment further. That is, they can make further representations on the existing representations. The government also promised to make the representations received available earlier. Now, the government will simply allow written forms of further representations. That means no further hearings. I believe this is a pragmatic approach, so we are striking a balance between public views and streamlining the procedure. Another point in the bill that is front of mind for people is the Section 16AA and also Section 11A for the Land Acquisition Possessory Title Ordinance. The effect of those two clause sections is this. Site that is resumed can be put to a temporary purpose, and with the Chief Executive and Council's approval, a site that is resumed can be put to another public purpose. If a site is left idle and the government wants to make use of the site, say use it for a warehouse or a car park, it's fine if it's used occasionally. But if that is written into the law, then people will get the impression something's wrong. So the government needs to take steps to allay public concerns. Now, as for using resumed site for another permanent public purpose, the government told us the original owner will get the compensation. So this person will no longer be the owner. And the government also said it's very rare to put the site resumed for one public purpose to another permanent public purpose. This can give rise to public concerns. The original owner's rights may be undermined, and there are operational difficulties with offering the land back to the original owner. So after listening to the Bills Committee's views, the government agreed to remove the clause that says the government can use the resumed land for another permanent public purpose. And there will be administrative guidelines on using a site for temporary purposes, such as a time limit on the use, and the approval is needed from a deputy director or a deputy secretary. Any subsequent extension of the temporary use will require the approval from a permanent secretary. And before such temporary use, the local stakeholders have to be consulted. I welcome this amendment. The administrative guidelines will also give rules for the departments to follow. There are a total of 179 committee stage amendments from the government. The government will also bring back the requirement about newspaper ads. This way, people from all walks of life, including those who are not tech-savvy, can access the information in newspapers. There are also amendments to make the provisions easier to follow. The commencement date of the bill will be September 1st this year, so that the bill can come into operation as soon as possible. I agree with these amendments. With these amendments, I hope they can remove barriers for development and speed up land supply, housing supply, and improve people's lives. Finally, I want to stress that apart from this bill, streamlining development procedures, the government should also streamline its own internal administrative measures. That way you can truly boost speed, efficiency, and quantity to speed up land development. I support this bill. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Dr. Chong-Meng Kwong, Madam Deputy, for our government, term after term, housing and supply of land have always been a thorny issue. So for the current term government, it has been acting responsibly because it has decided to speed up the production of land. For the Development, Town Planning, Lands and Works Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022, the aim is to amend Town Planning Ordinance, Lands Resumption Ordinance, and other pieces of ordinance legislation so that the land will become spade ready in 4 years' time instead of 6 years' time. I support the bill. In Hong Kong, we have got 108,000 subdivided unit flats. 210,000 citizens are living in such inadequate housing. Large number of young people would also like to have their own homes and start a family. light public housing may be well-intentioned, but then it is an expedient act. In the long term, we need to provide more housing land, and then we can resolve the zoning issue and respond to the needs of the people. I've noticed that there were 13 meetings. Members, citizens, and deputations have voiced their concerns. Regina Yip, our chair, as well as the deputy chair, Mr. Tony Chair, have been very persevering in making sure that the best is to be attained. Now, there will be changes to the plan-making process. The representations will be streamlined. Instead of 3 rounds, there will only be 1 round of making representations. There may be worries about eroding the chances, but then there will be development projects of different scales, like Area 137 at Chang Kwan O and nearshore reclamation, as well as the Northern Metropolis, as well as the Central Waters reclamation. So I think we should try to cut short the statutory time limits for consultation while making sure that we listen to the people. Then in this way, we can enhance the sense of satisfaction and sense of attainment on the part of the people. For the Northern Metropolis, there will be a large number of sites to be resumed. There will be a need to rezone many sites. Currently, the system is cumbersome. There are many repetitive steps. The efficiency is low. It takes a long time to get a site space ready. Now, within the bill, there are ways to deal with the problems. There will be parallel processing so that the government can carry out development-related procedures at the same time. It is also said that there will be a need to publish the notices concerning land resumption, and in this way, it means that anything that is inconsistent or anything that is ambiguous can be addressed. Therefore, for the Northern Metropolis, I think it's going to be complex. There will be fish ponds, wetland, private land, chow, and land owned sites. Yes, the government could have invoked the Land Resumption Ordinance to resume land, but then we are moving from stability to prosperity. I think we should address the problem of making the government efficient, and we should build a consensus between the government and the people in anticipation of the various statutory processes in relation to land resumption. I carried out an in-depth study concerning land resumption for the Northern Metropolis. The New Territories people agree that we need to develop the land there as long as there is a reasonable compensation rehousing plan. It will be fine. Now, owing to one reason or other, and owing to the historical background, we must respect the complexity as well as the history. In particular, when Chow and Tong sites are involved, we must consider the interests of the Chow and Tong members. I also recommend to the government that we should set up consultative groups with public officers and indigenous villages, as well as people who are familiar with the histories and people who can help in such cases. And then we can protect the legitimate interests of the indigenous villages, and they can keep their heritage, while at the same time they can tie in and contribute to the development of the city for our future development, and we can resolve the conflicts and thus preserving the social harmony. We can also learn from the mainland experience, as we all know that on the mainland, for 40 years, 50 years, they have gone through a full stage of development. It is now time for redevelopment. And we have got a town or city within a rural area. Or sorry, the other way around, if we have a rural area within the city. I think developers can also be given some assistance, and then citizens may be allowed to set up a joint enterprise, and then we can overcome the problems of demolition, redevelopment, compensation, etc. Since the year 2000 in Guangzhou and Shenzhen, they have gone through a lot of redevelopment exercises. We have got more than 1,300 villages within cities. I think we can learn from them. I think we can partner with the developers, and then we can learn from the experience, and we can especially be benefiting from their solutions concerning compensation. Compensation can be in cash or in kind. Maybe we can also appropriately relax the income test or the means test so that the entire village can be rehoused in the public housing estates to be built on the land reclaimed. In this way, we can expedite the progress of the various projects. So I spoke. Mr. Chen Hock-Fung. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Just now, Mrs. Regina Yip, the chair of the Bills Committee, reported to us the deliberation of the Bills Committee on Development, Town Planning, Lands and Works Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022. I'm not going to repeat her points. There is a misunderstanding that the government tries to push through the bill so as to grab the land blindly. That's not true. In fact, the amendments proposed in the bill will be beneficial. I have been serving the people at the district level in Central and Western District for over 20 years, and I have had experience about town planning. So I would like to talk about the target of the bill to expedite the production of land. Well, I know that with the new development areas, there will be over 2,000 more public housing units that will address the long waiting time of the public housing applicants. So many people are waiting for this site to be developed. But then I have to tell you that there were many hiccups. There was a lot of hindrance in the town planning process. This is because for that OZP, there was the proposal to amend the OZP in the year 2001. There were 5 waterfronting sites: Kennedy Town, incinerator, mortuary, as well as the marriage quarters, etc. There were 5 sites. 638 representations were received in relation to 5 waterfronting sites. Some were in support, others were against. Some would like to keep the sites for the sake of conservation. They are normal and common. So many people have went to the town planning board to air their representations, and within the statutory time limits, everything was completed. And then for the Highwayman Road, police marriage quarters, that would be for public housing. The town planning board also took a decision about the other 4 sites. They were supposed to be ready in the year 2023, 2024, but it was only last year that funding was applied for the development. But then the plan was really too large in scale. No one sought for a judicial review of the 5 sites I mentioned. Somebody else sought a JR in relation to the building height restrictions elsewhere on the plan because they said that their rights would be jeopardized. And then the case resulted in the town planning board's ruling being vetoed in the year 2022. For the public housing site, it was put on hold until the JR process was completed, and the town planning board was asked to re-examine the plan before the public housing project can go ahead. And then, instead of getting it by phases in 2023, we are looking at 2028, 2029, or even 2030 that we'll see it completed. So a delay of 6 years or 7 years. 2,300 threats are supposed to be yielded from the site, involving 7,000 residents. I think what should have happened is that the JR can take place in parallel with the construction of public housing on this particular site. That's exactly what the bill aims to do. We are in full support of the proposals in the bill. Let me cite another example in relation to the Central Western District. It's a matter of filibustering. We will no longer have filibustering within the LegCo. In the past, Town Planning Board also suffered from filibustering. In the year 2013, I think if you still recall, for the military pier right outside the central waterfront, somebody mobilized 1,000 people to make representations to the Town Planning Board. There was filibustering. They asked for video clips to be made, and they made it clear that they would not observe the speaking time limit of 10 minutes. They said that they would drag on until they were removed. At that time, Mr. Stanley Wong said that it was most undesirable. For the proposal in this bill, we're not trying to silence people. We just want to make sure that the process will be more efficient. Many representations are repetitive. They make the one point in the first round, they make the same point in the second round. Even if they are given the third round, they will make the same point. They won't change their stance even if they are given another chance to speak. They are not going to change. I think what is important is that their views should be considered and their views are addressed. Of course, some views cannot be sort of taken on board. Their representations cannot be met because they're unreasonable. Now, instead of 3 rounds of hearing their comments, there will be so-called 1.5 rounds. And instead of spending 70 months to go through the process, it can be cut to 9 months. And then for the Foreshore and Seabed Reclamations Ordinance, there is the introduction of the idea of minor works. I've been a Central Western District Council member for many years. We have done a lot to beautify the waterfront, but then there are inherent difficulties. Together with the Protection of Harbour Ordinance, we weren't able to do much. Say, for example, for Kennedy Town New Pryor Road, we have got a very beautiful place of the residential development, the Merton. And, many people were taking photographs in a very dangerous way. We had asked for a cantilever-like walkway to allow people to go to the waterfront. But then as a result of the Protection of Harbour Ordinance, we weren't able to do so. Now, with this proposal in the bill, we will be able to do it by way of a minor works project. We can have a boardwalk walk, and we won't be obstructing vehicular traffic. People can go there to check in with their own photographs, and they can walk their dogs. So we would fully support this bill. In the past, we could not and we dared not imagine that this would happen. With the improvement of district governance, I think we're going to have a better quality of life here. Once again, let me thank the hard work, thank our colleagues for the hard work in the deliberation of the bill. I'm most grateful to the administration, in particular the Permanent Secretary. I appeal to colleagues to support the bill, so I spoke.
Mr. Andrew Lam. Madam Deputy, previously, our town planning was an example for others to learn. In 1939, we enacted the Town Planning Ordinance, and with further development, we started from scratch, and then from just rudimentary to well-developed and detailed. And now we have a system which is very complicated, crisscrossed with different rules and procedures. And implementation, the different departments will work in different spheres as if they are in a multi-universe. But the current term government has decided to compress the procedure, the planning procedure, and embark on the legislative amendments. This is commendable. But while we want to remove the barriers, we cannot take away the protections and safeguards. We just want to remove unnecessary barriers and obstacles so as to prevent a stagnation of development and create a social injustice. We should safeguard people's right to learn and participation in our common values. As a member of Bill's committee, I participated in the deliberations all the way. Under the leadership of the chairman and the deputy chairman, members of the Bills Committee insisted on the development of our common goals and values. But of course, if we want to promote social values and benefits, some people's rights and benefits might be affected. We have to make sure that the decision maker all take into account all the views from all sectors. This time, in respect of the town planning ordinance and the 5 other ordinances, we want to deregulate and remove the unnecessary obstacles. But this is not the whole story. Members also insisted that the departments should improve their efficiency, and they should not be lax about self-regulation. The administration listened very patiently to members in the committee in the deliberations. Public participation is an important part of the plan-making process. In the bill, the 3 rounds of consultation was supposed to be reduced to 1, and they will only deal with written submissions. The bill proposes to reduce the 3 rounds of consultation to just 1 round. And many professional bodies and individuals are concerned that people's right to participate in the process will be undermined. And now the administration has accepted the Bills Committee's suggestions that comments on the amendments will be allowed. Because in the past, there are many representatives making repeated comments on the same points again and again. This has made the process a very lengthy one. The government would like to see that the different processes can proceed simultaneously. The town planning process is about regulating land use, not about development. So there was a lot of toing and froing and repetitions. And after land is resumed and development will follow, but the time taken would mean that the completed development may not be meeting social needs at the time. And it has now clarified in the bill that public use would involve roads and public utilities. And it is also stipulated that compensation can be granted before the whole process of funding approval has been completed. And this would do away with the problem of delays in project completion, and the affected owners would get the compensation earlier than before. And also for changes in land use, as proposed in the bill, has attracted criticism. Some people are concerned that the government will abuse the process to the detriment of private landowners. So we have asked the government to ensure that the right to private properties as guaranteed by the Basic Law will not be affected. Since Section 16A in the bill will not increase or undermine the statutory power of the government as they are, So there's no need to have this particular clause. And now the government has agreed to withdraw it. I appreciate this gesture from the government. This bill is highly technical, and the amendments are related to details in various ordinances. So I can't go into details at this point. But I have to say that even if we are able to reduce the administrative and statutory processes, if the government is inefficient, then not much gain can be made. Members in the Bills Committee, myself included, has asked the government to come up with an amended set of guidelines to ensure the public has the right to know. All in all, the amendments in the bill, as well as the setting of guidelines totaling in 33 items. There will be statutory provisions and other guidelines, and government officials are duty-bound to comply with them. There's no flexibility. But if we have a set of guidelines complemented by statutory provisions, we'll be able to more flexibly respond to social needs. But there will be a need for the government to regularly review and revise the guidelines. And we should make the best use of professionals' self-regulatory capacity so that the regulation system will be more efficient. On the question of social development, this bill is an important step when we embark on a new journey of development. There are many important tasks ahead of us. I hope the government can maintain the momentum of development and interact with this council in a beneficial way so that planning can be done and the processes can be improved, so that when we improve our urban environment and enhance our infrastructure capacity, we will be able to become once again a world-class example. With this remark, I support the passage of the Development Town Planning Lands and Works Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022. Mr. Tony Chair, Madam Deputy, I would like to express my support for the Development Town Planning Lands and Works Miscellaneous Amendment Bill 2022 and the second reading of the bill. The bill aims at amending 6 pieces of legislation so to streamline and the procedures to save time. The departments will be empowered to carry out concurrent procedures, and some ambiguities in the law are clarified so that our development can be speeded up, and then we will be able to have enhance our speed and efficiency in town planning. Our town planning procedures are well thought out and very well founded, but it seems that we are now bogged down by the complicated procedures because they are very cumbersome and require a lot of time to process. And therefore, the developers, consultants, professionals, and project proponents, as well as the departments, government departments, have to expend a lot of manpower and resources to follow some rather unnecessary procedures. In recent years, some people also abuse the processes to delay the development of Hong Kong and to undermine the government's capacity to administer Hong Kong and promote the economy as well as people's livelihood. The government is not able to produce housing in good time, and the waiting list for public housing is ever on the increase. With fewer public housing available, the property prices of private housing are increasing all the time. And therefore, we have subdivided flats and substandard accommodation in Hong Kong. And with insufficient supply of land and development, our economy will suffer. And we are building railways and other infrastructure projects very slowly. And we have spent too much time on the vetting of documents, affecting our creativity and professional development, and it also exacerbates the manpower shortage of the professional sectors. So whether I look at it from my own constituency's perspective, or from the citizens' perspective, or from the perspective of promoting Hong Kong's overall development and well-being, I would say that I must support this bill. As some other members have set out, one of the obvious examples of abusing the process is the plan-making process of the Town Planning Board in relation to consultation over draft OZPs. So, Madam Deputy, Philip Bustling was not really just found in this council, but also it started with the Town Planning Board plan-making process. People were allowed to make representations, and now the bill would like to reduce the 3 rounds of consultation to one round, and also to make provisions for the time limit and the way people can submit views. We have to stress that this will not affect the stakeholders' interest to be heard by the Town Planning Board. And the government has also taken on board the Bills Committee suggestions in that CSA will be moved to allow comments on representations to be allowed, and also on the amendments, and also allow the people to represent the stakeholders to attend the Town Planning Board hearings. And also the bill would introduce something to tackle the degradation of our environment, so that we have the right balance struck between the right to develop and conservation. The bill would aim at streamlining the procedure and time required for different infrastructure projects. For example, reclamation can be carried out while the planning process is ongoing, and there will be also provisions on minor works to allow the work projects which have significantly low impact would be spared from the gazetted requirement. But if a number of commercial operators and landowners will be affected, the statutory process will still apply and will not be affected by the amendments in the bill. Well, this is a pragmatic approach, therefore I support it as well. As for the enhancement of the land resumption process, is controversial in nature. I'll be commenting on this part in the committee stage. According to the government, all these proposals will speed up development in Hong Kong. For example, allowing the concurrent process of reclamation and planning, the time required for the entire development would be reduced by 9 months. I said in the past that the processes are getting longer and longer and more and more costly, but only some of the time was spent on the planning process. A lot of time is also spent on the internal communication among departments, because they need to consult each other through documents, and the total time taken could be years. And that is much more than the time we could save by streamlining the plan-making process. In the past 2 terms of this council, I urged the government to streamline the administrative procedures related to planning. The administration did something to respond. The secretary attended many of the seminars organized by my constituency and listened to the stakeholders. But the streamlining exercise has taken too much time. It's too slow. And according to the sector, the benefits that have been realized are very little. And now we have regulated areas, mechanisms, and minor works provisions in the bill, as well as the changes in land use after land resumption. There will be new administrative guidelines and procedures. I hope this time will not turn all the issues into even more complicated problems. I would recommend that the government regularly review the guidelines and procedures. And my constituency has also made suggestions concerning other statutory procedures, such as the fire safety vetting process. I hope there will be timely amendments and enhancement to the procedure. Lastly, I have to stress that even if we manage to streamline the administrative procedures, and if the officials do not do away with the old mindset and only do the minimum to get along, and if they forget their role as a promoter and facilitator, and they regard the development benefits to be a sign of collusion. If this mentality persists, we'll not be able to speed up development, and our housing and land shortage problem cannot really solve. So I submit.
Mr. So Chung-Wing. Madam Deputy, Hong Kong has been faced with land and housing shortage for a very long time. According to the latest housing affordability report, Hong Kong is the most unaffordable place to live in the world. This term of government endeavors to put a cap on the waiting time for public housing, but according to information of the Housing Authority as at the end of March this year, for general applicants for PRH public housing, public residential housing, is 5.3 years. Elderly singleton for 3 quarters before today, the waiting time stays at 3.9 years without any signs of reduction. This shows that there is still plenty of room for improvement in the shortening of waiting time. As we all know, that if we are to continue to reduce waiting time, to suppress rising property prices, as well as to provide a livable environment for the general public, the crux of the problem is that we need to remove barriers, streamline procedures, increase housing and land supply, and to improve supporting facilities. I agree and support the Development, Town Planning, Lands and Works Miscellaneous Amendment Bill 2022 and the amendments. The proposed amendments is in line with the basic law and doesn't contravene basic rights requirements. The bill enables primitive land to be turned into spade-ready land from 6 years to 4 years. For larger projects, it can be reduced from 13 years to 7 years. With the streamlining of process, reclamation can take place sooner. If the bill is passed, more land can be created for the government. This will ensure sufficient supply for housing. It also provides land support for the northern metropolis as well as the Kaoyi town. These two projects are important projects for Hong Kong's development. This is conducive to the overall development of our economy. What assured us is that in the bill, there is the new statutory procedure to receive objections. This better protects title owners and land users that are affected by the resumption. They have a chance to voice their views. This is an enhancement, and at the same time, it reduces time required to create land. At the same time, it ensures public participation and protect the right to voice views. In addition, there is the reinstatement of the second round of hearing to receive the second round of receiving further representation, and that resumed land will not change the public purpose made known previously. This shows the government is pragmatic and works in accordance with the law. The bill and the amendments are general issues. It may not be easy for the general public to have a full understanding. They may misunderstand that the proposal is to expedite the government's effort to resume land and to speed up development. And the public may misunderstand that the government would not be able to hear the public. Streamlining the process is the first step towards increasing the speed and quality and quantity of land development. Details should be made known to dispel misunderstanding that there is no check and balance. This will be conducive to garnering support from the public. I suggest that first, in the implementation of the legislative proposal, guidelines and supporting measures should be put in place. The powers given to different departments should be spelled out. Details of the processes should be made known. Publicity should be stepped up so that the general public will fully understand the policy intent of the bill. After completing the statutory procedure to streamline the process, the government should turn to improve administrative guidelines to enhance efficiency within the government. KPIs should be set to hold relevant parties accountable. This will further increase the speed of land creation. Reviews of planning should be done to take into account the needs of the present times and those of the future. We need to maximize the use of land. The government needs to monitor the implementation of the bill and, if necessary, improve the systems. I so speak. Thank you. Mr. Leung Meng Kwong. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I fully support the Development, Town Planning, Lands and Works Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022. I hope that the government will, after passage of the bill, put into action what's promised in the policy address last year, that they can increase the quality, speed, and quantity of housing to compress the time required for housing production to address housing and land problems in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is highly developed. So land supply decides the future of Hong Kong. Without sufficient land supply, then housing development and other developments cannot take place. The current land development process is cumbersome. Land resources are not properly used. It's just like what the government's been saying, that the path is riddled with obstacles. As at the end of March 2023, for general applicants, the waiting time is 5.3 years, way above the targets of 3 years as promised by the government. Applicants will have to wait for a very long time. According to the annual report 2022 of the long-term housing strategy report, about 127,000 households are living in inadequate housing, such as SDS, subdivided units, or flats in industrial buildings. It's just like the long-term housing strategy. Supply of housing cannot provide a steady supply. About 1/3 of the production will take place at the beginning, and 2/3 of the production will materialize in the second half of the time. And there are lots of uncertainties because for a lot of the projects is still under study. The government can streamline processes and procedures to compress the time required to bring forward the completion date of housing, but it's easier said than done. The time and cost required is not proportional to the land development. Say, for example, to turn a primitive site into a spade-ready site, it takes at least 6 years. For some other sites, more than 10 years. It's a very heavy time cost. This dampens our potential. This doesn't help with people living in inadequate housing, and it also costs us a lot of opportunities. Inadequate housing has drawn the attention of the state leader. In July 2021, Mr. Xia Baolong talked about 4 hopes, 4 expectations, one of which is that Hong Kong will be more prosperous. President Xi last year made a speech on the 1st of July. He also talked about 4 expectations. That is to resolve livelihood issues and to maintain and development impetus in relation to people's livelihood. He talks about giving a more spacious house or flat to people. So to address these concerns, streamlining the process needs to be done as soon as possible. I will take the words from Ms. Bernadette Lin. Well, when it comes to streamlining the process, just like other processes, it's not about whether to do it or not. It's about how it's to be done. The bill was introduced in December last year. There has been in-depth and comprehensive discussion about this bill. I was a member of the Bills Committee. I'd like to thank Mr. Tong Li-jie, the Deputy Chair, and Mrs. Regina Ip, the Chairperson of the Bills Committee. A lot of members have expressed their views. We all want to improve the bill to clarify unclear or controversial provisions to avoid further amendment, because this will delay the speed of land development. The proposals under the bill works to shorten time and to streamline procedures. The team in the Development Bureau, the permanent secretaries, they've all been very positive. It shows that the government team may have a mission to accomplish, but they are not calcified. They will listen to views. In the bill, there was an original proposal of a new 16AA to specify that the resumed site may, for a temporary period, change the use of the site for some other purpose before the permanent use. I'm very concerned about the Changsha Wan temporary poultry wholesale market. It's been on temporary basis for about 49 years. I've expressed my concern to the administration a number of times. I urge them to consult properly and to respect the views expressed by the sector, and that there should be restrictions imposed on the temporary use. My demands have been responded to in a positive way. The government will move amendments to say that before they put the site into temporary use, there will be consultation, there will be administrative guidelines, and in relation to resume site. 16AA2 to 4 will be removed in relation to using the site for a different public purpose. And these acts have given us confidence. I would like to say that streamlining the procedure is the means, not the end. If we are to increase the speed, quality, and efficiency of housing supply, we need to all work together so that we won't fail the aspirations of the public and the expectations of the central authorities. I speak to support this bill. Thank you.
Dr. Teck Chi-Yuen. Madam Deputy, a series of measures were proposed by the Development Bureau to streamline development process. The purpose is to streamline and speed up development process and enhance housing supply and land supply. The TPB would be empowered to invite representatives to public hearings, but the arrangement would be amended. The 3 rounds of representations would be compressed into one. Streamlining development process involves professional and statutory processes. Now, this amendment is in relation to amending the process for putting forward representations. Now, according to the Hong Kong Institute of Planning professionals, representation is necessary. Procedural justice is needed. It is the essence of a civic society. Now, these are important principles. Now, in the UK, the government would consult the conservation groups in development process or even give them statutory powers. It shows that we must involve the public in development. Now, many members have raised concerns that public views might be neglected and public and organizations may not have a chance to voice their concerns. Now, the Development Bureau empowers the TPB to invite representatives to the meeting is against procedural justice. It will not serve to enhance or speed up the procedure. Now, the Development Bureau has made amendments to welcome representatives and the public to join public meetings. Now, we welcome this change. Now, the amendment will compress 3 rounds of representations to 1 round. This will sacrifice the chance for consensus building between the government and the public. And also, the time saved has sacrificed the rights of the public to know and to participate, and it prevents the plans from being enhanced. It is an disproportionate sacrifice. Now, of course, there is the amendments that representatives cannot make representation on comments or make comments on representations. It is a disruption to public or fair participation, and it is a regression. I don't support combining the 2 processes. Now, public representations and comments should be kept. We should keep all the steps of taking representations so as to ensure that stakeholders being affected by the amendments proposed by the TPP can still have a chance to put forward their representations. Now, in terms of exercising statutory powers or statutory rights of the public to amend the plans and comments on the amendments, it is essential. Now, organizations of vested interest as well as land developers would participate in public hearing. We have to ensure that the public are also given a chance to attend the public hearing to ensure a balance of power. Now, we are an international city. If there is a regression on fair participation in the development process, it would affect our international image and discourage investors. Now, since the government has accepted our proposal, I support the amendments bill. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Madam Deputy, we have a set of comprehensive legislation to govern development process, land resumptions, and planning process. Now, the requirements intend to ensure procedural justice and also professionality as well as the balanced participation of affected parties. Now, the experience has told us that it rendered the development process unduly long and also render the development process inefficient. Now, to turn a primitive site for residential use to a spade-ready site, usually it takes 6 years. For major and more complicated development projects, the time required is even longer. For many years, I have urged the government via many channels to keep abreast with time and remove red tapes. We have to reform the mechanism in use for many years so as to compress the development process and enhance cross-departmental coordination. This is to meet the aspiration of the public for more houses being built more quickly. Now, in the first policy address of Mr. John Lee, he announced that this time of the government would adopt a multi-pronged approach to enhance the quantity and quality of land creation by streamlining development process. Now, the Amendment Bill 2022 proposed by the government is for such a purpose. I and the engineering sector support the amendments bill. Now, after the introduction of the bill, a bills committee was established. Now, because of the limits of membership of the BC, I was not able to join. However, I attended the first meeting on the 30th of January after the establishment of the BC. Now, I talked about my experience serving on the TPP, and I lamented the abuse of the TPO. 8 sessions of meetings or of hearings were held for one item, and there was no limit to the speaking time of the representatives. It was like a marathon. It shows that the planning process is not proper and it leads to time wasted. Now, this amendment bill will deal with much more than those phenomenon. Now, the sector and the public who are concerned about Hong Kong's development will support this bill. Now, there are 5 directions of amendments, including streamlining and shortening statutory time limits, avoiding repetitive procedures of a similar nature, providing an express mandate in the law for the governments to proceed with different procedures in parallel, improving inconsistent or ambiguous arrangements, streamlining other miscellaneous processes for more effective use of public resources. The major contents include amending the Town Planning Ordinance Cap 131 to streamline and improve statutory processes in relation to town planning, and also amending the Lands Resumption Ordinance Cap 124 and Land Acquisition Possessory Title Ordinance Cap 130 to improve the procedures in relation to resuming land for public purposes. And also, the Foreshore and Seabed Reclamations Ordinance Cap 127 will be amended, as well as Roads, Works, Use and Compensation Ordinance Cap 370 and Railways Ordinance Cap 519. They will be amended so as to improve certain procedures in relation to works. Now, I said at the BC meeting, now the blue bill is 366 pages long. Now, what is the relationship between the blue bill and the proposed improvements? It is hard to read. Now, I suggested the government give us a flowchart to list out all the improvements for each segment. There should be a comparison between the original time required and the time required after improvements. This will show us how the proposals will make the development process more efficient and help us engage in a more focused debate. I'm pleased that Ms. Bernadette Lin, the Secretary for Development, acceded to my request. Madam Deputy, the amendments bill will enhance the speed and quality of land creation and housing supply. I support it. However, for the frontline construction industry, we are still troubled. Now, this is about the resumption of brownfield sites by the government. As a result, a lot of operators, including major storage operators for major building equipments and so on, have lost their living space. Now, they are confused about the government's policy. Without land, they cannot survive. Now, I and Mr. Louis Leung, Mr. Chen Shu-hong, and other representatives from the construction industry met with the Development Bureau to convey the severity of the situation. Now, the government must identify new land. Just by changing the existing land use will not address the problem. Now, with a lot of infrastructure projects down the road, we cannot just focus on future industries. We have to ensure that existing land users can continue to operate. Otherwise, we cannot enhance speed, quality, and quantity of development. Now, a lot of land is owned by private owners. We have to harness the market's power to address the issue. Now, as the meeting, we were given a positive response. A task force would be established to help the trade identify new land for operation. Now, Hong Kong does not lack land. Now, among the 1,100 hectares of land, three-quarters of them are in idle. Now, only 1/4 of the land is developed, including brownfield sites. Now, brownfield sites are very important for many industries, including the storage space for excavators, hoisters, and other building equipment. And it is also essential for storage and logistics purpose. Now, taking back the land from these operators would kill the industry. Who else will be able to build houses if the industry is gone? So before resuming brownfield sites, the government must first identify a site for the relocation of the operators. Now, we don't just lack land for housing, we also lack land for economic activities. Now, without economic activities, everyone will have to ask for payouts from the government. Now, I will further put forward my views on the CSA to be proposed by the government. I support the passage of the Amendments Bill 2022. And also the amendments to be moved by the Secretary.
Dr. Wendy Hong. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Land is where economic activities happen. Without enough land, the economy is held back. We cannot improve services and meet people's needs. This means land shortage is the biggest public policy problem for Hong Kong. This problem has plagued us for many years. We are not short of land. What we lack is a system that allows us to make efficient use of our land. There are three levels of problems confronting us. First, the statutory processes. There are ordinances under this system. And second, the internal administrative approval procedures. This has to do with civil service and officials. Third, our development model. This has to do with our mindset in governance. This bill addresses the first level of problems, that is, the statutory processes. Land development in Hong Kong is subject to a number of ordinances: the Town Planning Ordinance, Land Resumption Ordinance, to name just a couple of examples. The ordinances are there to ensure transparency and fairness. The views of stakeholders are considered in the process. The ordinances, after going through amendments over the years, are becoming more complex. You end up with overlapping provisions and an ossified system. For fairness, we have compromised efficiency. There was political confrontation in the past. People abused the statutory processes to block up development. So land development hit a brick wall. Today, the Legislative Council is no longer there to hinder development. It's there to work with the government to foster development. This bill is about enhancing, streamlining development procedures. It's there to guard against abuse. This is where we need social consensus. Last December, the Development Bureau submitted this bill for the first reading. It's a bulky copy of bill. I could feel the weight of the responsibility. These ordinances aren't amended until decades later. The Town Planning Ordinance has been in place since 1939. The amendment only happened 3 times in history. I was lucky enough to be able to join the Bills Committee. The chairperson, Mrs. Regina Ip, and Mr. Tony Tse led the meetings over the 15 meetings over the times. The meetings started in winter and now we're in summer, and we're now resuming the second reading. There are several changes in the bill. First, getting rid of repetitive processes, and second, turning consecutive procedures into parallel procedures. And third, streamlining matters so that changes can happen more quickly. The social, political context today is vastly different from a few years ago. We have now moved from chaos to order. We now have patriots administering Hong Kong. The political turbulence in the past is no longer there. The kind of abuse, obstruction we saw in the past have not gone away entirely, but things have much improved. Most people are pragmatic. They express their personal concerns. They may not see everything eye to eye with the government, but that's just some tensions within the people. And this is not about an us versus them as if between two rival groups. So during the discussions over the bill, we need to streamline the procedure to empower the government to take the action, but we also need checks and balances. This is to safeguard the interests of stakeholders. We need public participation. We need input from professionals. We want speed without having the process backfiring. This is by no means easy. We had discussions, debates, and we managed to finish the scrutiny. And we should be glad to see this. There are three tensions in our development. This bill resolves only the first one, that is, the statutory issues. The second level of problem is the internal administrative process. This has to do with the efficiency of the civil service and officials. The internal approval process in the government is even more time-consuming than the statutory procedures, and this is holding back our development. Rezoning land, for example, composite development area, redeveloping old buildings. These are not projects led by the government, but they are subject to the oversight of multiple departments. The developers have to turn to different departments to get a green light. Departments take a defensive mindset. They simply go by the book, no coordination. Departments offer contradictory comments. So the project proponents, are caught in a helpless and impossible position. So to boost efficiency and speed, we need not just this bill, but also we need to streamline the government's internal approval procedures. And we have to sort out the inconsistencies in the process. So I have some suggestions. First, when development applications come in, the government can only offer one round of comment. And second, designate a single office coordinating the work. Or we can have a single official acting as a project manager, consolidating departmental comments so that we won't end up with contradictory comments from different departments. Third, we should set a time limit by which the government has to offer feedback. We need to improve the statutory procedures and also the administrative procedures, and it's only then we can achieve results. Madam Deputy, with better statutory processes and administrative processes improved, we still need another piece, we still need to achieve something else, and that is our mindset in governance. We take a market-oriented approach. The mindset of the past was to respond to market needs. We provide the software and the hardware the market needs. It's demand-driven, market-oriented. This model has its merit. It's flexible, it's practical. This can give full play to the market's forces. But this also comes with a downside. It lacks foresight and vision. And it lacks top-tier design to make the vision happen. So in planning and development, we look at the current demand and then forecast future demand. We try to make the demand and supply match. But does the demand make sense? Can we change the demand? So our development is held back because we want to meet the market's demand. We take a band-aid approach, and we don't have a vision so that people look forward to. Stakeholders care only about their own needs, and they don't look at the long-term development for the community as a whole. That's why we have a hard time forging a consensus. Indecision, inaction, that's what followed. We need to adopt a new mindset. We have to go from a market-oriented approach to a vision-driven approach. we need inspiring visions and also top-tier design that will deliver on the vision. We need to meet market demand, but we also need to shape market demand and make choices on values and get stakeholders to come to a consensus to combine an efficient market and a capable government and achieve capitalism with Hong Kong characteristics and gradually deliver on the vision. Madam Deputy, I so submit I support the bill. Mr. Louis Long. Madam Deputy, I'm a member of this Bills Committee. First, let me thank Mrs. Regina Ip and Mr. Tony Tse, being the chairperson and the deputy chair, for their effort, and also the electrical secretariat staff for their hard work. This is a debate about streamlining the statutory procedure to shorten processes and speed up housing and land supply. This is to respond to people's needs. The real estate sector is a long-time supporter of boosting speed and efficiency and speeding up land development. So in principle, I support this bill. Article 6 of the Basic Law and Article 105 protect private property rights. Under the Land Resumption Ordinance and the Land Acquisition Possessory Title Ordinance, the bill proposes a change. So, with the Chief Executive in Council's approval, site that is resumed or acquired can be put to a different public purpose. This makes people worry whether this is in line with the principle of protecting private property under the Basic Law. But the government adopted comments from the Bills Committee. The government proposes an amendment to remove this proposal. I welcome this. Madam Deputy, as we streamline procedures, we need to ensure the views of different stakeholders are duly considered. So I also welcome the government's amendment about keeping the requirement about further representations. Given these amendments, I support the resumption of this bill's second reading. This bill is just the first step in streamlining statutory procedures. Simplifying the statutory processes alone, while leaving out the administrative processes, will mean we won't see faster supply of land and housing. I bring up administrative procedures for a reason. It has to do with this bill. On June 14th, we had a council meeting. The Secretary for Development answered a member's question about the Kutong North and the Fanning North new development area. The Secretary for Development agreed to extend the time limit for the practice note, lower the premium in just around 2 weeks. That is, by June 30th, the Lands Department got the work done. So it looks like with the Secretary's guidance, the Lands Department got work done quickly. But then for Kutong North and the New Territories North new development area started in 1999. The plan started in 1999. The sector made many comments to the government. Back in 2014 at the TPB meeting, the trade told the government in no uncertain terms that to deliver on the new development areas, there was a need to make the land swap procedure more efficient. Planning for transport infrastructure needed to be in place early on. Better coordination between departments was needed to ensure timely delivery. In May and October last year, the trade wrote to the Secretary asking for extension of the limit on June 30th because there's massive delay in the infrastructure of the new development areas. Given that, There was no way for the government to grant the land swap applications. Despite these repeated and clear requests, they were ignored. Starting from 1999, the government started planning the Fanning North, Kutong North new development areas. It's more than 24 years since then. Housing was promised, but has yet to be delivered. So I have this concern. This bill is a bold move in streamlining procedures. If there is no attempt to streamline the administrative procedures among departments, we will not see better efficiency in development. Let me give you an example. The Lands Department, that is, lands, planning, housing, these different departments, each has its own standards when it comes to floor area. Someone wants to build a covered footbridge so that the residents won't be exposed to the elements. 3 different departments, and on who's to approve the request, each has a different answer on how to calculate the floor area for the covered walkway. And then there was the joint practice note number 4. There was a standard approach to calculating floor area. The trade thought the problem was fixed, only to find out that the joint practice note does not cover redevelopment projects. A property developer wants to build a bigger club so that residents can bring along their children for recreational facilities. That way they don't have to go to LCSD facilities and take up the slots there. But then there is the sustainable building design. A developer wants to build more facilities. They need to dig deeper into the ground, and they need to build basement for the car parks. Round-the-clock ventilation and lighting are required for the basement car parks. Power bills have to be paid for by the local residents, and the dirt goes to landfills. Is that in line with the principle of sustainable development? Madam Deputy, this bill proposes shortening the time frame for public consultation, but the government's own administrative processes take 10 to 20 years just for the studies. The land resumption process will be shortened, but the title checks that follow will be time-consuming, and there will be no performance pledges. I support the bill, I support the resumption of the second reading, but I hope the Secretary can give me a pledge that she would also proactively streamline the administrative processes to boost efficiency. In 2020, the Real Estate Development Association compiled this submission, and it says boosting housing supply is very difficult. Towards the end of the submission, there's this part. Raising living standards while keeping things affordable, offering pleasant spaces, these are reasonable expectations from Hong Kong residents. Experience shows if we have a land development system that can operate without imposing constraints, then we can totally have 28,000 private flats come out every year. And this can also fix the problem with the public housing issue. The current housing woe is the result of the policy cock-ups of the past 10 to 20 years. So government departments need to up their game. They need to work together. They need to boost public-private collaboration. In the past, there was cooperation, and that achieved jobs, wealth for people. We built many buildings. If the government, the community, and business can work together, we can achieve great results. This passage gives me many feelings. I hope the government departments can work together, adopt a new mindset, give us performance pledges, deliver what people want, and support the chief executive's work in boosting speed, efficiency, speeding up land supply. The departments need to crack on with the work. The sooner they can do this, the sooner people can get their housing.
Ms. Chen Yitming, thank you, Madam Deputy. Since January this year, the Bills Committee has held 13 meetings. We spent over 6 months' time to deliberate the bill. Today, we resume the second reading. We know that there will be the Northern Metropolis development to tie in with opportunities afforded to us by the 14th Five-Year Plan. We need to enhance the efficiency. We should provide more housing land. We should consolidate our advantages. We are here looking at town planning, land resumption, and land acquisition. The relevant legislation will be amended so as to streamline and shorten the statutory time limits, avoid repetitive procedures of a similar nature, and avoid inconsistent or ambiguous arrangements, and we should allow for procedures being carried out in parallel. Well, there are other development issues that have yet to be dealt with outside the bill, so I want to share my observation. In future, I hope the government will look at the following. First of all, disbursement of compensation. Well, I know that between the land is resumed and compensation is paid, there should be interest to be paid to the unpaid compensation. Well, I'm glad to see that the calls have been heeded. In the past, in the new territories, in the rural areas, there were many such cases. The Lands Department resumed the land, but then the compensation was not paid into the accounts of the chos or tongs because individuals objected to the resumption. Despite the consent of the majority of the members, the compensation was held up. In one case, there was the holding up of the compensation for 22 years. So people are losing out because of inflation. I think the compensation should be issued to the or deposited into the account of the chos or tongs previously owning the land as soon as land has been resumed. I think there are already rules and laws to govern the operations of chos and tongs. The government shouldn't broad-brushedly freeze the compensation amount. The second point is that we should come up with a mechanism to develop both the city as well as the rural area. Well, I think the government hasn't reformed its mindset. This is going to affect the development of the Northern Metropolis. I still have to see a similar mechanism that has worked in the city to be applied to the rural area. For the Sentin Technopole, I think what is being suggested is that the indigenous villages' land will be set aside, and I do think that we are going to have new housing estates being developed within the new towns. Now, the government is saying that we need to compete for talents. I think for Sentin Technopole, we need doctors, architects, accountants. I think we want them. We want those who hold such professions overseas as our second generation to come back to Hong Kong. Well, how do the people of Sentin view the government's policies? I think the government must address the problems that we have highlighted. In fact, the administration knows that few people understand how to apply for home ownership or public housing. If the administration is not going to treat us apart, then there will only be more conflicts and confrontations. In future, if amendments are to be further proposed, then we should make sure that the rural area will be treated like the city, and then chos and tongs should be sort of assisted in relation to the payment of compensation. There should be the relaxation of small house policies. The government can take the lead to assemble the ownership, and then high-rise buildings can be built instead. In this way, we can release the potential of the land, and then we can better plan for the northern metropolis. Well, in fact, we have had many successful examples. Say, for example, in Shenzhen and Guangzhou, you can develop a city on a previous rural land. We can reserve some land, we can earmark the land for the original villages so that they can keep their lifestyle. In fact, it is a matter of having prosperity across the board. It is a matter of common prosperity. And we can also consider having high-rise small houses. Well, for the traditional villages, they are incompatible with high-rise buildings if they are allowed to be built around them. I think we should try to explore the feasibility of private-public sector partnership, and then the government will be exercising monitoring role. The third point I want to share is about the planning of brownfield sites. The government is focusing its attention on Shantin, Hachun, and Hongshui Kiu. In the course of it, brownfield operators have been given facilitation measures. And as a result, many brownfield sites have been relocated to the eastern side. And as a result, we have very scheduled development. Along the major thoroughfare, we have got many brownfield operations emerging. It will be difficult to relocate them, and I'm really worried. Now, there are two concrete issues. First of all, for the northern metropolis, the infrastructure is yet to be brought up to date. So if you allow the brownfield operations to move to the areas lacking infrastructure, there will only be traffic congestion and even fires. The administration would not take the initiative to regulate the brownfield sites. We have had a very detailed discussion. I think we should look at the material use, and it is also a matter of town planning enforcement. Now, the government would like to conserve the environment. I do subscribe to this, but then at the same time, the government cannot be passive in governing or in regulating the brownfield sites. The government doesn't carry out inspections proactively. It is only when there is a problem, then the government will go after the occupants it will go after the landowner, but not after the occupants. There should be the use of high tech in order to track down the operators, and maybe the utilities should be suspended so as to have a strong deterrent effect. Upon passage of the bill, I think we should embark on a second round of review of the relevant legislation, covering the points that I have made a moment ago. That is allowing the villages to group together to develop the sites, and then we can have common prosperity as advocated by the motherland. Mr. Kenneth Long. Thank you, Mr. President. In his policy address, this chief executive has said that the administration will have new sources of land, and there will be better tools so as to get back the control of the supply of land for housing. Well, there are many pieces of legislation involving covering town planning and land development. But then it takes 12 years for a primitive site to become space ready. We need to go through rounds and rounds of consultation to deal with comments, representations, and objections. Today, we're here to deal with the Development, Town Planning, Lands and Works Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022. The bill aims to amend 6 pieces of legislation so as to be more efficient and effective in dealing with town planning and land development matters. I think they have far-reaching results. If we can't sort out the matter properly, there would only be more tension and confrontations. During the deliberation of the bill, the chair of the Bills Committee, Mrs. Regina Yip, held public hearings to listen to the views of individuals and deputations. Hung Yee Cook, which I represent, also came here to air our views. Well, according to Hung Yee Cook and the stakeholders, I understand that the main concern is whether there is an objective mechanism to govern the government's powers to resume land from private landowners. I think the most controversial proposal is CAP 124, Lands Resumption Ordinance. It has always been regarded as the imperial sort. For the current term government, it would like to add new section 16AA to CAP 124. That is, the land resumed can be used temporarily for other purposes, or with the Seeing Council's approval, the site can be used permanently for another public purpose. Now there is this question. Landowners are really worried. They are worried that the government would put the land to other uses than the one known to them when land is resumed. Maybe it is said that the land is resumed for public uses, but at the end of the day, it's used to build a refuse collection pond or a public toilet. Even though it is still a public purpose, but it could become a nuisance. The administration eventually heeded our views, and the government is going to move an amendment to delete the provision allowing the government to use the land resumed for another public purpose. There will be administrative guidelines to say that temporary use could not be longer than 3 years. An extension would not be for the period of more than 2 years. The temporary use should not and would not affect the use of the site for the genuine public purpose in the long term. The CSA shows that the government is being responsive. In the past, in the course of developing the new territories, a large number of sites have been resumed by the government, and in many cases, the government paid a very small sum of money to the villagers on the excuse that it's for public purpose. At the end of the day, many sites are assembled together, and then a new town is developed, or the land is sold to to a developer at a high price. This goes against the principle of natural justice. If the bill is to be passed, I hope in future the administration will no longer harm the interests of the landowners. Please also look at the needs of the people around the sites. The administration has been developing many new towns. A large amount of land has been resumed from the hands of the private individuals. Some villages have been have disappeared as a result. Brownfield site operators have been crowded out. Chos and tongs have been affected. Well, chos and tongs are important. They are entities that can bond together the indigenous people in the new indigenous villages in the new territories. So I hope that in future the administration will consult the Hung Yee Cook and other rural bodies. While you develop the new territories, make sure that you preserve the social harmony of the villages in the new territories. In the report to the 20th National Congress of the CCP, presidency emphasizes high-quality development. Other than raising the efficiency and quantity and speed, we should make sure that we give emphasis to quality. Make sure that you protect the interests of the landowners. Make sure that you will respect private property ownership. Make sure that we can share the fruits of prosperity. Madam Deputy, Mr. President, so I spoke, and I have to declare interest that my family holds land interest in the new territories.
Mr. Tang Fei, President, I would like to express my support for the passage of this bill. Well, land and housing are related in a close way, and because of shortage of housing, we have seen soaring property prices and also narrow size flats. This has made people difficult to get married and raise children, and the waiting list for public housing is getting longer and longer. At the end of 2023, the average waiting time was 5.3 years. SMEs are also finding the business environment very difficult because of high rent. So many problems are caused by high property prices and rental. According to measures, it's important that we earmark and allocate land properly to have good governance. Land development takes a long time, and there are many factors involved. We are concerned about the supply and the speed with which the land is supplied. And it seems that the supply is getting slower and slower. And this bill would amend the Town Planning Ordinance, Land Resumption Ordinance, Land Acquisition Possessory Title Ordinance, and the Foreshore and Seabed Reclamation Ordinance, etc. It aims at streamlining the town planning process and improve the procedure for land resumption for public use. Simply put, the ordinances will be consolidated into a set of legislation for this council to consider. It would streamline the procedures in land development, so it would reduce the time for land to be formed and provided with infrastructure. But we have to take care of two interests. That is a right to the private property. Hong Kong is a society which treasure and value the private property rights, and right to land ownership and property rights are most important to many people. On the one hand, we resume land in the NT, but at the same time, we should not affect very extensively the private property rights system in Hong Kong. Otherwise, the affected party, the aggrieved party, would take the government to court. According to media reports, in the past 2 decades or so, very few cases have resulted in overruling the government's resumption decision. But of course, we need to balance the rights of the two parties. And the government should weigh the pros and cons in the measures to be introduced. And the Town Planning Board has to make sure that the land is able to be utilized to the maximum extent. And therefore, the plan-making process is very time-consuming. However, we may try to streamline it, because we don't want to have planning mistakes in the process, so that we cannot get the optimum benefit from the development of land. This bill demonstrates that the current government is a proactive government. It is willing to protect the private property rights as well as the land development system. And it's always trying to increase the speed of land supply and therefore increase the housing supply, so that we can do this with speed and efficiency. So I submit.
Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I now call upon the Secretary for Development to reply, then the debate will come to a close. Secretary. President, in relation to the Development, Town Planning, Lands and Works Miscellaneous Amendment Bill 2022. I actually owe my heartfelt gratitude to Mrs. Regina Ip, Chair of the Bills Committee, Mr. Tony Tse, Deputy Chair, the 13 members, the Secretariat and the Legal Advisor, as well as colleagues in the Development Bureau for their work to complete the scrutiny so that the bill can resume the second reading debate in the last sitting before the summer recess. I also would like to thank Mrs. Regina Ip and members who have spoken. They have given their recognition to the permanent secretary, the principal secretary, and a number of colleagues, as you call them, the all-ladies team. I thank you on their behalf for the recognition you give them, because your comment and your compliment means a lot to us. They may not be here, but they will still be watching the live cast. 18 members have spoken. They have given us their valuable comments and they've given us their support. I really appreciate that. Land is an important factor for the development of society and the building of a livable city. We need to speed up land formation and create capacity for the long-term development of Hong Kong. Over the years, an elaborate set of laws has been put in place to govern different processes in delivering the developable land. These statutory requirements seek to uphold the integrity and professionalism of the regimes and enable the diverse views of affected parties or interested members of the public to be duly considered by the government in the process. Having said that, practical experience has shown that these processes could take up a considerable, sometimes disproportionate amount of time. Matters of a similar nature are sometimes handled repetitively. Procedures now running in a sequential manner have room for parallel processing. After extensive consultation and exchange with stakeholders, we introduced the bill in December last year to streamline and improve statutory procedures on planning, land resumption, and works. The bill seeks to amend 6 pieces of legislation. It covers many technical areas, and they are complicated. The Bills Committee started the scrutiny in January this year and completed its work at the beginning of last month. A total of 13 meetings, including a public hearing to receive views, have been held. During the scrutiny of the bill, members have had in-depth discussions and have made valuable comments. They are, in general, supportive of the direction of the government's amendments. As for individual provisions, in particular those on planning and land resumption, members have shared with us their constructive views. Upon careful consideration, we have adopted some key views, including the reinstating of the existing procedure of receiving further representations over 3 weeks, an improvement and the withdrawal of proposal to allow the use of a piece of resumed land for another public purpose under the Lands Resumption Ordinance. I'll provide detailed explanation when I move the amendments. During the scrutiny of the bill, a number of members and deputations have reminded us that apart from reviewing and expediting the statutory ones, we need to streamline administrative process. We fully subscribe to this view and are working on it. For example, to more effectively assist plannings in putting together information required, we have strengthened the pre-application inquiry mechanism. We are also updating relevant guidelines to require departments to provide comments within a specified period and to remind departments to advise applicants on major issues of concern. so applicants are informed of what is required as soon as possible. Institutionally, the Development Bureau set up in December 2020 the Development Projects Facilitation Office, which is dedicated to coordinating the work of departments to expedite the vetting and approval of large-scale private residential projects on a case-by-case basis. The Lands Department set up a dedicated unit before 2019 to handle lease modifications of large-scale private residential projects, while the Buildings Department formed in March this year the dedicated processing units to handle submissions of large-scale private residential projects. These administrative process work is ongoing. We have a dedicated team in the Bureau to handle this. There is also a contact point for the sector to receive views. Say, for example, we understand that stakeholders would like the Lands Department to expedite the land title verification work. The department is drawing up open operational guidelines to standardize workflow and handling of various matters with a view to speed up the process. We also would like to stop the title verification work from delaying our goal, and the guidelines are expected to be published this year. Just now, members have talking about the different standards adopted above ground and underground in relation to exemptions. We have started looking into that as well. Some members talked about land resumption. In the past, planning goes first before we consult on the land resumption and deal with compensation. And now these processes are in tandem. The Lands Department will have to take stock of available resources to unleash manpower to handle these matters. We have to meet the challenges that under the existing institution, we handle the details well. That's the same approach for brownfield site. We have dedicated teams to handle brownfield site applications. We hope to remove barriers on a case-by-case basis. We've also floated ideas. In the resumption of brownfield sites, we have caused impact to a number of brownfield sites operators. We would like to enhance our coordination. Say, for example, if land acquisition can be delayed, we will delay it as much as possible. And when there are multi-story buildings in the project, even before the land is formed, we would like to make available the land as soon as possible for the provisioning of brownfield site operators. Upon passage of the bill, we reckon that large-scale projects, say for example new development areas, the time required for turning a piece of primitive land into spade-ready site will be shortened from around 13 years to around 7 years. For typical projects, the time will be reduced from 6 years to 4 years. The Bureau and relevant departments have started the work on revising existing guidelines, drawing up new ones, and updating forms and information kit to implement the proposals for the commencement of the bill on the 1st of September. I ask members to support the bill and the committee stage amendments to be moved by me so that we can implement the proposals to streamline statutory processes and to speed up land creation for the development of Hong Kong. President, I so submit.
I now put the question to you that the Development, Town Planning, Lands and Works Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022 be read the second time. With those in favor, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. Development, Town Planning, Lands and Works Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2022. This council now becomes committee of the whole council to consider the development